I want to talk now about the blood-brain barrier. Now think back to when we just discussed the central nervous system and also discussed the peripheral nervous system. Remember, the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, and it's separated from the peripheral nervous system by a series of layers, right? The meninges. There's another kind of structural arrangement that actually separates, the tissues of the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, from the tissues in the peripheral nervous system or from the rest of the body. And this is something called the blood-brain barrier. Now, all of your tissues, all of your trillions of cells that make up you need to be fed, right? They need to have glucose. They need to have amino acids so you can construct proteins, right? They need to have phosphate, obviously, and fat so you can construct cell membranes. All these substances need to be provided via the bloodstream. So your heart pumps blood, and it comes out through arteries, right? And these get smaller. Oxygenated blood is carried in arteries, get smaller into what are known as arterioles. And these get very tiny, very narrow plumbing known as capillaries. And in the periphery of your body, these capillaries are actually leaky. The plumbing leaks, in a lot of your body, a lot of your tissues. And that's a good thing because it allows for substances that are essential to the survival and maintenance of cells to leak out of the bloodstream and reach their intended targets. So glucose, oxygen, amino acids, vitamins, things like that will leak out of the blood of the capillaries and tissues and feed the cells in these tissues, the periphery. And if we look at a typical capillary, this is a piece of plumbing, right? This is through the tube through which your blood passes, very small, and we cut it to a cross section here, right? It turns out that the walls of that tube are made up of cells, right? These cells have membranes that are phospholipid bilayers that are impermeable. But it turns out that they're leaky. They touch each other to form the structure, but they have gaps between one cell and the next. So it's not a tight wound tube. It's something with a lot of holes that allows substances to leak out of these capillaries into the tissues and feed the tissues. Well, it turns out in the central nervous system, there are fewer gaps. These cell membranes of the cells that make up the walls of the capillary are they form what they call tight junctions. There are no holes that let substances easily leak out of the capillaries into the central nervous system. And fatty, uncharged chemicals can still cross because if it's fat, it can go through fat, like, it can go through the lipid bilayer. But charged substances, including many drugs and ions, etc., are going to be kept in that, capillary. They can't easily cross into the central nervous system. The way that they do cross is via those proteins that are embedded in cell membranes. Many of them are transporters that literally grab onto substances that are essential for the function of central nervous system tissues, like neurons in the central nervous system, and pull them across, pull them out of the blood, pull them into the brain or into the spinal cord. I want you to think a little bit about why we have a blood-brain barrier. What does the blood-brain barrier do in terms of protecting us, particularly from viruses, from bacteria, from drugs, from other substances that are traveling in the blood?